Hi, my name's Niki. This is The Interventionalist, and today I wanted to talk about lesbian dating, but particularly lesbian dating tips, or talk about some things that before I came out or when I first came out and first started dating women, I wished that I had someone to talk about these things with to help me navigate dating and navigate my own self-understanding related to relationships and both just like relationship, romantic dynamics, sexual dynamics, especially in regards to the very specific kind of language and culture that exists within the sapphic community, the lesbian community. That you just, I don't know, it's an adjustment. You go into this world where there's terms and there's almost like expectations that come with terms that everyone seems to know, and they like identify with or don't identify with, or some people are like, I don't want to identify with any labels ever, and then some people do, and it's like, I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. And I wished I had someone to talk about these things with, but it was hard because I didn't yet know like a ton of gay people, especially ones that I felt like I could have those more like maybe like taboo conversations with, maybe the TMI conversations. So that's what I wanted to talk about. I thought it would be helpful, something that I would have appreciated. And so I'm going to talk about some of the things that I've learned that I at some point or another I was just confused about or wish that I had some direction regarding, and how I experienced it and the things that I've learned through it. And the first one that I wanted to talk about is the concept of a top or a bottom, being a top or a bottom, or being with somebody who identifies with being a top or a bottom, particularly in the lesbian community. Because I made a video recently, a couple videos ago, I'll like link it at the end of this video, about the history behind the concept of a top and bottom in the lesbian community. And if you watch that video, essentially the term top and bottom was adopted from the gay community. It wasn't originally something that was created within the lesbian community. It was like adopted from the gay community, who already had dynamics that sort of fit that term, and lesbians didn't really have the dynamics that kind of made those terms make sense. It didn't really make sense. But it was an attempt to sort of develop polarity in lesbian relationships so that you know who was acting and who was reacting, to overcome passivity that a lot of lesbians had in relation to dating because of their socialization to be more passive in romantic and sexual situations. So that was kind of the reason for adopting those terms, was the polarity. And they also adopted and tried to mimic things related to S&M dynamics, dom and sub dynamics. They tried all these different things, but what it comes down to is the concept of, I guess, a top or bottom in a lesbian community, which kind of equates to more dominant or submissive. Those are the terms they also messed around with during that time to figure it out, how to overcome that passivity. And so how you define a top or bottom in the lesbian world is just not clear. Some people say it's not applicable, some do, but the reality is that I've experienced, and I think honestly seems pretty consistent, is at face value, a lot of us use those terms and in some way or another tend to find some identification with them. Whether or not in entirety we completely identify with the terms, I think a lot of people end up being switches, so they kind of identify with them, don't identify with them, but a lot of people use those terms. And before you come out, you don't know what you are, and you might not even really know what that means when somebody tells you that they are that thing, what that means about how they're perceiving themselves and the role that they like to take on in sexual dynamics or even just romantic dynamics. Again, I think that concept, that theme of behavior of a top or a bottom extends beyond just sex, even though that's kind of a more sex related term. Anyways, I didn't know what the fuck it meant. And I remember, I think I've talked about this in a video before, but on my first date with a girl when I came out when I was 21, my first date with a girl, we went to the movies and we didn't really talk because going to the movies on a first date is a bad first date. You don't get to talk. I learned that. We went to the movies, we didn't really talk. And then right after that, we walked to this restaurant that was maybe 2 minutes away, but it was a really crowded, busy street, so we didn't really talk then. And so when we sat down was when we actually started talking. And within the first 2 minutes, the first thing that she asked me was whether or not I was the boy or girl during sex, which is a crazy fucking sentence. There was a language barrier there for sure. It's a crazy way to word it, but I know what she was asking, whether or not I would identify more with the concept of a top or a bottom. English was not her first language. Like, I understand what she was trying to say. I understand that there was a language barrier, but that like sentence like was fucking crazy to hear on a first date, especially one that like we had not had any kind of like discussion or any kind of conversation that even implied anything sexual. But it was crazy to be asked that in public on a first date. And the funny thing is she didn't just ask it once, because I was stunned. I was like literally stunned. I just sat and I just stared at her. I actually did not know. Very rarely in my life have I been left speechless. And I was genuinely speechless. Like, I could not get words out. And I just stared at her. And she thought I didn't understand her because of her accent. And so she repeated it again. And I just stared at her more. I was like kind of trying not to laugh, but I was just stunned. And then she kept repeating it like 3 or 4 more times and getting louder because she thought that I didn't understand her because of the accent. I understood. I understood the question. It wasn't the accent. It was the fucking question. There were people around us. There was this like old men around us that were turning and looking at us at this point. It was just, like horrifying. It was a horrifying moment in my life. And then after that, she talked about her ex in her home country for like an hour and a half straight. It was just, it was terrible. It was terrible. But I remember when she asked me that, I was stunned. I didn't want to answer it anyways. I thought it was crazy. But I remember being uncomfortable because I didn't have an answer. And to be completely honest, like I didn't really know exactly what that would mean for lesbians. Like, I didn't even know like what that would be interpreted as, like in actual physical dynamics. Like, what would that actually really mean, right? Without just defaulting straight to what I know about heterosexual traditional sexual dynamics. I didn't know what that meant. And as I've like gone through my lesbian experiences, the things that I have learned in relation to those terms that I think are helpful, not only to kind of understand what people mean when they're talking about what they are, what they aren't, but also just like understanding yourself generally. And these terms might help you like do some like self-exploration in terms of connection and intimacy. Something that I've realized is that a lot of the times when somebody says that they are a top or a bottom, I think it's often referring to how they feel most connected to a person. So there are power dynamics where somebody is like, say, more dominant, and then they'll identify with a top, and then there's a bottom who's just like inherently, the concept is like you'd be more submissive, right? That's kind of the idea. But I do think it can extend beyond that, because if we go beyond just like someone's more dominant and someone's more submissive and get, I guess, more into what it really means to feel fulfillment in those specific roles. Something that I've talked about with friends and that I've realized is that I think a way to kind of perceive it that might help you understand yourself and the person you're talking to is, I think often people who like to top or who say that they're top can feel a sense of connection and fulfillment through touching another person and witnessing their reaction, like getting to witness their impact on somebody else and getting the opportunity to touch somebody else. I think that there's a certain connection that is felt through that. Like, it maybe makes them feel the most connected to someone. Like, it feels like a really special experience for somebody to allow them to touch them and allow them to like witness them in like a really vulnerable state. And then from like my experience talking to other people and then just like what I know, I think a lot of the times people who identify with the term bottom tend to feel most connected to someone through being touched, or more importantly, allowing somebody to touch them and allowing somebody to witness that level of vulnerability and have access to them to that extent. That might be the way that they feel the most connected to somebody. That might be like one of the most intimate things that they can offer somebody. And I feel like that's a good question to maybe ask yourself or frame when you're thinking about sexual relationships, when you're thinking about terms like top and bottom and like, what the fuck am I? If somebody asked me that, what does that even really mean? Like, what are you asking me? And how would I actually know what I am or I'm not? Or how do I know what I am or what I'm not beyond just like necessarily the actions that I'm doing, right? Like, we can behave in a certain way, like fulfill the role in and of itself. Like, say it's a top, you're like topping somebody. So I guess like controlling the pace, like leading the situation, doing the initiation, like initiating certain things, like that's kind of the idea. But maybe you wouldn't identify with the term top as much as you can play the role, you know, and maybe still find enjoyment in it. But maybe it's like a good way to understand yourself sexually to ask if it's through that role and the behaviors that tend to accompany that role, like through the initiating and like having an impact on somebody and like getting to touch them and witnessing that reaction and things like that, if you feel the most connected to them in that moment. And I don't think that's a negative thing to say. No. You can still feel really connected to somebody through doing something like that. And if it is through being touched in whatever way, being on the receiving end of some kind of touch, allowing somebody to witness or access you that way, or allowing them to impact you and then allow them to witness that impact, if that's the way that you feel the most connected to somebody, or if in some ways it feels more, I wouldn't say it always has to be performative. Maybe it does feel performative sometimes, and it maybe feels like a bit like unnatural for you in whatever way, and that's part of the reason maybe you don't like being on like being the receiver, say if you want to call it a bottom. Maybe it's like being a top, you feel more like you're performing. Say it's not like you're necessarily feeling like you're performing, but more so that there's just a difference in the level of intimacy and connection that you feel to the person that you're with in those differing roles and positions, you know? Like I personally feel a very different kind of connection and intimacy with somebody and depth of connection and intimacy depending on those two things. Like allowing someone to touch me versus touching someone else, both impact me, and I do feel connected to somebody that way, but one definitely makes me feel more connected to somebody than the other. And I have friends who like, some say that it is touching another person and they're very much like dominant top types, but they're not stone tops. Like they will receive, but they just consistently don't feel as connected to their partner. It doesn't feel as special to them, essentially. It doesn't feel as meaningful or special. And then I have friends who aren't pillow princesses and they will top, but they feel the most special when they're allowing their partner to touch them. But neither, like the friends I'm referencing in particular, are not stone tops or pillow princesses. So they do switch, right? And so then they can feel varying levels of connection, but they do feel a sense of intimacy and specialness in one position over the other. And I also think it's important to ask yourself if you're like in those positions, if it ever feels performative and in what way. Like, do you feel connected to what you're doing at all? Do you feel like, is there like in any way, shape, or form an impact that it's having on you besides maybe just feeling like you're doing a good job at fulfilling the role that you're expected to be fulfilling, whether that's like performative feelings in receiving or performative feelings in giving, whether or not you're actually feeling connected to whatever you're doing, or if you feel like you're performing the role that you're essentially, because of what you're doing, supposed to be fulfilling based on what you know or the ideas that have been put in your head, or maybe what you assume the other person is expecting. And I think a lot of us can even immediately go into a sense of like performance mode in sexual relationships. I think because it's such a vulnerable thing to do with somebody, and to allow them to witness you in such a vulnerable state, and because a lot of us are exposed to these really idealized, overly sexualized, scripted relationships and also like sexual dynamics, that sometimes I think feel like when we go into them, there's something that we're recreating, or we're supposed to look a certain way or do certain things, or we're supposed to respond a certain way. And so when you enter like a space like that, it can sometimes be easier to default to fulfilling whatever script that you've witnessed in your life in order to feel like you're doing the right thing, versus like being really present and basing the right thing off of genuinely how you feel and how you are being affected in that moment, and how your partner feels and how they're being affected in that moment. And that's why things like sexual relationships are so fluid and like really subjective to the two people, or however many people are in the experience, like the interpersonal experience. But it's helpful to know yourself when you go into situations like that, and then you learn more about yourself through those situations. But I just remember being really confused, and I would feel really insecure about not knowing. the answer to any of that shit, like not knowing what it even really meant, beyond having like kind of like a heteronormative idea in my head. It kind of feels like a lot of the times lesbians that I would talk to like couldn't really explain to me what that meant. Vague ideas of like someone's more dominant and someone's more submissive, and I'm like, okay. And then sometimes vague ideas of just like, well, who's leading in that moment and who's receiving, and then I'm like, but there's some people who only identify as top, so like what? I was just confused. And then like through my experiences, I think that all of that can be true at once. Like there's a variation of what it means. Like to be a top, maybe it is always to be a bit more dominant even when you're in a receiving position. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's not even really about dominance. Maybe you're a top and you're not really dominant. That's possible too. And you can be a top and you cannot be dominant at all. Like you could be quite submissive. But what it means for lesbians is just different, or I just didn't understand what the fuck it meant. I was just really confused. And something that helped me understand myself better and like the things that I need in relationships and in sexual relationships, and the things that make me feel most connected to a person, that helped me like bring language to that, to like sort of share with both a partner and then have them communicate back their feelings about something, like how they feel most connected to somebody. It's helpful to understand these dynamics within yourself and then how they relate to the person that you're with. So like understanding if you feel most connected to somebody through being touched versus like most connected to somebody through touching them. I also wanted to talk a bit about like what does it mean when somebody tells you that they're like a stone top or a pillow princess, because you know, there's so much discourse online about this. I have a couple of videos talking about them. Maybe I'll put them at the end too. There's so much discourse about them, and it's so funny because I have been like openly out in a lesbian and like dating women for the past like 4 years, almost 5 years, and I have come across a lot of stone tops and pillow princesses. It is not rare. Like for some reason there's discourse around it as if it is some rare anomaly that's abnormal, which is so fucking annoying, first of all, which I've already talked about before in past videos. But they're not rare. They're not rare. I've come across quite a few of both, and I've been with both, and I've identified at one point in my life as a touch me not, a stone top, and I've also been with people where I like played the role of a pillow princess, and I also went through a period of time in my life where I was just like really fucking traumatized, and I have a video about that where I was like started dissociating in every position in sex. So I also couldn't touch someone without, just whatever. Not the point. The point is you might come across people like this, and what does that mean for them? But I thought I would just give maybe some perspective as to what somebody might mean or what they're essentially being fulfilled by when they're one of these roles, or they identify with one of these roles, because I think it can be easy to be like, well, what are they getting out of it? Maybe this will provide some perspective from someone who did at one point identify as a stone top and just was honestly like, I really enjoyed it. Like I enjoy I don't know, I enjoy topping, I guess is feels like a weird way to word it, but here's, if anyone's a pillow princess watching this, or if anyone's like trying to wonder like how they might identify or like explain their own relationship to things like topping or like being the one like giving versus receiving, here's how I would explain it. If you ever worry that like the person you're with only wants to top or is like a stone top, and you're like, but what if I need to give back? Like what if they're not actually enjoying it? Or what if like I like that's unfair to them, whatever. This is how I would explain that dynamic. So maybe it'll give some perspective. As someone who identified that way at one point, the best way I could describe how it is just as fulfilling to me, or in being just as like fulfilled in sex through a role like that without receptive sexual touch, the best way I can describe it, and like the metaphor I could use or like analogy, is I play volleyball a lot. I love volleyball. I played my entire life. I'm super competitive. I like being good at it, and I like getting better at it, and I get a lot of endorphins from playing volleyball. Like I love it. I can play like quite obsessively. I can play a lot of sports quite obsessively. So like maybe I'll make that more general. I like really intense physical movement and being good at it, and I get a lot of endorphins and dopamine from that, and it feels good physically, right? Because like it's a physically active thing to be doing. But I can do that for hours and be so fulfilled by the end of it, and like so like satisfied with having played and like really had so much fun. Like I don't go home and wish. I don't need more in order to leave that situation fulfilled, if that makes sense. So essentially, like I don't need to leave volleyball being like touched back in some way in order to leave being like so incredibly fulfilled. I leave feeling incredibly fulfilled because I got to do something that I like and that I like being good at. And as someone with like a competitive mindset, also in general, getting to do something that like I got to get better at and like improve at and like do a good job at. So it's a lot of fun. Like that's incredibly mentally fulfilling for me, and then also physically fulfilling, right? Like to be able, I don't know, it just is. But I don't need more from that situation to leave like feeling incredibly like fulfilled and satisfied. I would say that that's like how it feels. So if you ever wonder like if the person you're with is like a stone top or doesn't need to be like reciprocally touched in that capacity, and you feel bad, or you like are unsure if you should be doing more, or how could they be fulfilled, or if you're a pillow princess and you just like worry about that, just know that like there's genuine fulfillment, like physical and mental fulfillment that can happen in sex that does not require very specific kinds of reciprocal sexual touch, because I'm like equally fulfilled in both situations. Like I can say with 100% confidence that I have been equally fulfilled like being in like a purely like stone top role for the times that I was, while also being somebody who was like in a receiving role, and at some times in my life like more fulfilled by that like stone top role and that sort of fulfillment that I was getting from that. So if someone tells you that that's what they are, and you don't really know what that means or what they're getting from it, maybe that can give you some perspective. Like there is something really, really, really enjoyable to be had there that has quite literally a physiological effect on you, like the endorphins that you get physically from being good at something, and then also being good at something that's like physical, and then also like the mental stimulation, enjoyment you get from getting to do something that you like to do. And if you're competitive like me, like you like to be good at things. So yeah, I just thought I would give some perspective. I didn't know what the fuck that meant. I know what that meant. The first time I was with someone who identified that way, I didn't know what that meant. One, I didn't really understand what they were then getting out of it, which led me to feel like really guilty, even though it was like consistently on their end they were like, no, like I really enjoy this, like this is what I want, and I always just felt like a sense of guilt because I didn't really understand, and I guess then I went through my own life experiences, became someone who identified that way. Now I understand. So if you ever feel like a sense of guilt around that, maybe that can help ease the guilt. If you've ever wondered what do people who are stone tops get out of it, that's an example, because I was one. So that's what I got out of it. That's the kind of fulfillment that I experienced. For the people who just don't understand that, they just don't understand. I don't know. I can't help you. There's people who will just like be very, very, I don't know, like to police people's sex lives, and I find that to be really weird. The video I made talking about like the emotional labor of lesbian sex talks about that. I find it to be odd. But maybe that's just like some perspective about the different kinds of fulfillment that you can feel in sexual dynamics, and maybe it doesn't always make sense to other people, but it only has to make sense to you and hopefully also your partner, right? And that's all that matters. But really, it just has to make sense to you. Whatever it is that you find the most fulfillment and joy in or doing, it matters that you feel like honestly, genuinely fulfilled, and it's not performative because you feel like you're doing the right thing versus like what's genuinely right for you, but genuinely, honestly feels true to you, and it's important, I think, to try and explore that and try and clock when you are maybe trying to perform versus trying to actually genuinely identify and discover what you enjoy or what you don't enjoy, and you deserve to have really enjoyable, intimate experiences in whatever way, physical or romantic, whatever it is, you enjoy to genuinely 100% authentically enjoy those experiences. But you can only really get to a point where you get to do that when you allow yourself to be honest about your reactions within those experiences to help curate and tailor them to yourself and what you need. And then you can express that and find a partner who's compatible with you, and that's how we find the most compatible partners, is by understanding ourselves to the fullest degree to the deepest extent that we can. And so we know what to look for in other people. We know what to communicate to like try and gauge compatibility in people because we know what we need to say. And we'll know like what we need to look for. And that's how you find the right people for you, is by finding yourself first and feeling secure enough to verbalize and vocalize the things that you know about yourself and the things that you know that you need and that you desire. And that takes another level of, I think, self-worth and confidence to believe that you're worth communicating those things and you're worth being someone who receives the things that makes you feel good in relationships, just as you feel like you offer them or you aim to offer them, you know? So self-exploration in whatever way is really helpful. And when I talk about this, I guess that's kind of the point, is like, I hope at the very least it can encourage a sense of self-exploration to move past any sense of performance that is preventing you from feeling genuinely present in the moment and experiencing things the way that would feel best to you and whoever you're with. And also maybe like what the fuck that means. I did not know what this stuff means. Like I was always just so confused. I don't know. And then I just had more experiences, and you just learn as you go. You just learn as you go. Like people who identify as a bottom or people who identify as top, like it does not look the same. Like I said, like people who identify as a top don't always mean that they're dominant. People who identify as a bottom does not always mean that they're submissive. Like it could, but they're not mutually exclusive. So like I had to get that out of my head, but that was at some points like all I had in mind, right? Like for example, like for an example of one that you experience that contrast, somebody who was a bottom and also like the most aggressive person I've ever met. This is like kind of a funny story because whenever I think about this, I just always think like shit. I went out with this girl once. she was a pillow princess actually, and she was a bottom, and she used these terms to describe herself, okay? Like it was at a point in my life where like I honestly still like kind of didn't really know what that meant beyond like, okay, like they're more submissive, right? And that's what I had experienced up until that point. Like that was the term associated with submissiveness in my experiences so far. Like it had never been contrasted, right? And then the first time we kissed, I was like, holy shit, wait, what the fuck? Like this is the least submissive person I have ever been with. Like of everyone that I've ever been with, people who are like really self-proclaimed dominant in bed, like self-proclaimed tops that are really dominant, had nothing on this girl, dude. I was like, holy shit. And I've never been with someone who kissed so physically like aggressively or like dominantly. Like I can't even explain it. And it was so hard. It was like physically hard. I was shocked. There was no submissive personality that was coming through with this girl in any kind of like physical, sexual way. And it was so humbling too, because like, I mean, she like literally almost knocked me on my ass. Like she kissed so aggressively. Like, so her face would just like push mine. I had to like hold my own. So I didn't fall over, because she was like so like, I don't even know how to explain it. Like aggressive is the only word that can come to mind, but aggressive and strong, like physically strong. And also like really dominant. And so aggressive, not in a bad way, but like aggressive and strong. So like, I guess like trying to like, or is technically like really guiding a situation, but also with like a strength and assertiveness that I just haven't experienced. And if we were standing up, she truly was like, I was always like 2 seconds away from being knocked on my ass, like falling over, which was so humbling. Like it was so humbling. Like it just was, I hated it. Like I just hated it so much. I liked her. I hated the feeling of being like, oh my God, like she could really like knock me on my ass right now. Like this is so embarrassing. I had to work so hard to make sure that I didn't get knocked over. And then I would eventually just like have to try and like maneuver us in a way that she couldn't like knock me over. And a couple times I would try and like make it so that we were against a wall. That didn't really work. So then it had to be horizontal. Like if we ever kissed standing up, I had to find a way to get horizontal so that she couldn't like push, like knock me over. She wasn't even trying to, but I was like, damn. And I can confidently say that I'm like a physically strong person. Like especially for my size and our size comparison, that should not have been a thing. Like you shouldn't have been almost capable of knocking me on my ass while we were standing up. Like And so the fact that I was like really like had to hold my own, I remember I felt so humbled. I just like after that I remember like upping my weight in the gym when I was lifting, because I was just so humbled. Like, I don't know. I just like, holy shit, like I cannot have a girl capable of like being able to almost knock me fully on my ass, because she can kiss so much more, kiss so much harder than I can, in such a more like dominant way. It's really the only way to put it. But she was literally a pillow princess, and she was a bottom, and one of the most like dominant people I've ever met. It was such a contrast. I'd never experienced that. It was like crazy. And I just adjusted, I adapted. And then after like, you know, we stopped seeing each other, I collected some new information on the different sort of dichotomies and dynamics that can exist within like lesbian sexual relationships. And that contrasts, I think, the general understanding we tend to have with these terms, especially before actually having life experience with them and experiencing the things that tend to challenge the stereotypical understanding. And I was like, damn, okay, like shit, like I need to prepare. Next time that I'm with someone, if they tell me that they're like a bottom or pillow princess, like that does not mean that they're not going to be really dominant, which was a major adjustment for me. I was like, whoa. Well, I'll never forget that. Like she was a really sweet girl. That's what makes it so funny, is that she was a really like sweet, soft-spoken woman. And then the second we kissed, I was like, what? Holy shit. Like I didn't even know you had this physical strength. Like that was crazy. Whatever. I was just like so taken aback. It was so funny. I'll never forget that. I hope she's doing well. I hope she ends up with someone like quite a bit stronger than her, so that she can't knock him on her ass. It's probably not so fun to be with someone that like falls over every time you kiss them. It's crazy. And then one more thing, sorry, I was looking at my notes. One more thing that I've talked to different like gay friends about when we were trying to understand like ourselves sexually, or when I was talking to one of my friends who, when she first came out, we were talking about like essentially kind of this, like the concept of like a top or bottom, like what are you? What would you identify as? And I remember we like came to the conclusion that a good way to kind of like a testament to what role you might naturally default to that feels like the most natural to you or most fulfilling to you this is like TMI. If you imagine a sexual situation, like if someone said right now, like imagine an ideal sexual situation for you, whether or not you've experienced it, what is it that comes to mind? And assuming that it's like unfiltered, truly like an honest ideal that comes to your mind, do you immediately picture yourself in a receptive state or in a active state? Are you in a receptive position or an active position? Because that's it. That we do not all have the same answers to that. I think a lot of people assume that because the way that pleasure is like the same way people don't understand how stone tops can enjoy sex without being like sexually receive like a reciprocal sexual touch. People just always assume, I guess, that you're going to be imagining yourself in the receptive role, but that is not the case. I've talked to like quite a few different gay people about this, and there's been a variety of different answers. What is the first one that comes to mind? Doesn't mean that I think you'll always default to that state or you don't enjoy the other one, but it might help you understand more if someone asks you if you're a top or a bottom or like which one you might be. Maybe that can help give you some perspective. And when somebody answers that, give you some perspective about like the role or the position that comes most naturally to them or that is ideal for them. Like, is their ideal sexual situation is them in an active role? That could be helpful. I guess that's TMI. Didn't really sound TMI, right? And then I wrote notes about things related to flirting. I have talked about this before in another video about like tips on like flirting and U-hauling, but I think I'll go over a little bit like of the tips for flirting, because I think flirting is one of those things where like people kind of describe it in a really general way. Like, what does it mean to flirt? A lot of the time, like it's kind of generalized under the idea of being charismatic or like having very specific lines to provoke a certain specific reaction. And I don't always think that that's necessary. I think that can feel like a lot of pressure. I think that there can be an expectation there to like, I don't know, a social expectation there to fulfill that might not always be that easy. An expectation around social cues that might not always be that easy to pick up, you know, like we don't always have, I don't know, it's not always that easy, especially when you're nervous and on a date. Like you might just not be someone who can like think on their feet, like pick up on something and have like the perfect line, right? I think that's totally normal. I think that's how most of us are. So something that I've learned in like lesbian dating and in the video that I've mentioned this about before is that I think the best flirting comes from the best listeners. So I think a lot of flirting, or a lot of what matters more, and I think translates in a lot of ways to causing someone or evoking a warm feeling in somebody, or a feeling that makes them feel good about themselves or makes them feel wanted or desired. I think listening to somebody and responding or speaking to somebody in a way that very actively demonstrates that you were very present and listening to them goes a lot farther than like the perfect flirty one-liner, and it's a lot more meaningful. And it might not be stereotypically flirty, but I think it's very more realistic, and I think it can lead to a more honest and comfortable, disarming kind of connection. I think it can be disarming to have somebody be just like very present and honest in the way that they're speaking to you and making it clear that they're listening and interested in you, versus like being really good at these like witty, flirty one-liners. Sometimes I think that can naturally cause us to have our guard up, not because we feel like off-put, but because there is a performance at play. Like a lot of flirting, sometimes I think we imagine a performance, and who's good at it, who's not good at it. I think sometimes it's like, how good of a show can you put on for somebody, versus like, how honest can you be in your interest for somebody that makes it so clear that they are being paid attention to, that like they matter in that moment, truly like have your undivided attention and they're having an impact on you. I think that matters so much more. And when I talked about this in my video before, like some advice that I think could just be helpful is like demonstrating to the person that you're with that like they're having an impact on you, like making sure that they're aware of it. And I don't think this has to be like achieved in some like crazy way. I think that you can do it in like really easy, like natural, honest ways. For example, something I mentioned in the last video was, I think that an easy situation like that you could sort of portray that like this person is someone genuinely having an effect on you, but you're also listening to them. So like you're showing them they're both being desired, but also being paid attention to, is interrupting them. I think it can be helpful to demonstrate that they are truly having an effect on you, like to the extent that it's like, wow, I have to say this right now. Like you're having enough of an effect on me that like I need to take a second and let you know, because I can't think. Like it's that much of an effect, but I'm also genuinely really paying attention to and listening to you. And I think a way you can do this is like interrupting them at the right time, like find the right moment. Don't interrupt them when they're talking about something really serious. I think that can be like pretty simple, right? Like when they're talking about something pretty simple, maybe like something simple that they just did that day, or something not so serious, whatever it is in a conversation where you can feel that break where it's like not going to be rude. Like maybe they're talking about like their favorite food or something very basic. You can interrupt them and maybe just be like, sorry, I just have to, you're so pretty, it's distracting me. I just have to let you know, but I swear I'm listening. Like I swear I'm listening. Okay, like continue. It's just distracting me. And I think when you do that, you don't just say continue. I think ideally you can say, okay, like I'm listening, keep telling me about like whatever they were just saying, which is important. So you have to clock whatever they were just saying too, for sure, so that you can re-reference it, so that not only were you just like demonstrating to them that like you're having enough of an impact on me that like I have to stop this conversation really quick and let you know because I'm like a little distracted, but I'm also able to balance that with like a genuine interest in you. Let me re-reference what you were talking about. And I just think that's a really simple way for somebody to feel like for somebody to feel the sort of like just good feelings, I guess, or the specialness, like to feel special and to feel wanted and desirable, without making it overbearing or even really necessarily performative, right? Like you're not really trying to say something to impress them. You're just saying something honest, which is like, damn, like you're affecting me. It's not even like you're the most beautiful woman in the entire world. Like, wow, like something, you're just like, wow, like, sorry, I'm a little distracted. Like you have a really nice voice. I don't know. I'm just like, have a hard time focusing. Sorry. And then like re-reference it and tell them to continue. I think it depends on the person that you're with. Some people are not the kind of people, and you could probably gauge this pretty early on, like that would want you to be like, you're just really beautiful. I don't know. Or like that looks really good on you. I'm just a little distracted, but okay, continue. Like if someone is not the kind of person that would really like being called like really pretty or like really beautiful. Maybe that's not their vibe. You can say something like that, whatever they're wearing, that dress, that shirt looks really good on you. Not just looks really good on you. I'm a little distracted, but I swear I'm listening. And then continue the conversation. I think that's a really simple way to demonstrate that you're paying attention to somebody, but also that they're desired, you know? Breaks the friend energy pretty damn quickly, I would say. And it's important to do that, I think, early on so that you don't fall into a friend zone on accident with each other. Especially like if you're two people who have always been like sort of more passive in relationships. I think it's an easy way or a pretty generally like not too scary or difficult way to approach that, like breaking that barrier. I also think eye contact is really good. So if you're talking to them and you can give them a compliment, making like direct eye contact, if you say things like you look good or like that, I like your dress, or like I like your shirt, I like your whatever, I like that on you, right? Like make it specific to them. Eye contact is really good with tone. I would say like if you're trying to compliment somebody in that way and you want them to know that it's not just like, oh my God, like I love your shirt, like it looks so good. Drop your tone. Don't make it so high. I think it just feels a little more friendly when it's like, I love your shirt versus like, I'm not gonna do it. Just like a more lower your tone a little bit. I think that can be helpful. If you don't like eye contact, it makes you uncomfortable. I think you should tell them the effect if you're not able to show them with like your eyes or your necessarily your tone and your eyes. I think at least still say it, even if you're not making eye contact. You can still say the same kind of sentence, but without the eye contact. So if they still know that like you're paying attention to them, even if you're a little nervous to make like direct eye contact with them, you're still like, that looks really good on you. Sorry, like I'm distracted. You don't have to make eye contact with someone when you say that. If you're saying a specific compliment that demonstrates like that you were looking at them, whether or not it's directly in their eyes, you know, like you're still saying a compliment that shows like, oh, like they're paying attention to me. Like this person is paying attention to me. I don't have to worry that their lack of eye contact is because they're not paying attention. They just complimented me in a way that like shows me that they were literally paying attention to me. So I think the specificity of a compliment is always really important. I think it can be helpful. I think that's maybe like an easier way to approach flirting, or a way that seems less scary. I don't even know if scary would be the word, but less pressure or like less anxiety inducing because of a preconceived expectation when it comes to flirting, I guess. Like it's this mythical thing that you need to be good at. And I think all that really matters is that you need to be honest. And if you're interested in somebody, be honest. And I think also a lot of flirting is vocal curiosity. So that's what I mean, like the best listeners are the best flirters. The more that you listen to somebody, the better your questions are. And the better your questions are, the more somebody feels seen and cared for and paid attention to. So if you listen really good, you'll be really good at asking questions, and you'll be really good at making somebody feel good because they are feeling seen. So listen well and be confident enough to be vocally curious. And a lot of people appreciate somebody asking them questions about themselves. So don't feel embarrassed, I think, or shy to do that. Think about the way that like sometimes you might wish somebody would like put in the effort to ask you really specific questions that are actually applicable to the thing that you just shared, to like demonstrate curiosity in your life and project that onto the person and assume that they would also like someone to be curious about their life. So don't be shy about it. Be like openly curious about the things that they tell you, and be specific. It doesn't have to be general. Be specific. Like if they say that their favorite place to go in the summer is here, ask like, oh, like do you go by yourself? No, like they go with their family usually. Like, are you close to your family? Like, do you guys do a lot of trips together? Get more specific, like get curious with specificity. Like you care about what they just shared with you, not just like a general like, oh, cool, nice, I go there too sometimes. Ask more about them and what it means for them to go there and why they like going there. Maybe, yeah, like if there's something specific that makes them like that, like a childhood memory, like those are the things that tell you something about someone. And those are also the things that make someone feel genuinely seen, you know? Or like someone's genuinely interested in them, as they're interested in more than just a general answer. So don't let the answer be general. Ask for specificity. So be curious, I think, is helpful. Within reason. You don't want to like ask like really deep, like intense questions on a first date, you know, like, I don't know, like start asking questions that are like asking someone about their trauma, but still I think delve into specificity versus like delving into a bunch of different generalities. General conversations, aim for some specific ones. Like on a date, I think it's better to almost have like a couple more specific conversations than like 10 general conversations. Who cares like about like a bunch of general things? Like those are not really going to tell you something about someone. Like it's the story behind those general answers that tell you something about someone. I feel that way about a lot of things. Like if someone has a skill for making other people feel seen or is really good at communicating their feelings or like things like that, right? Or like, yeah, say that's what it is. Like someone is really good at making other people feel seen and listened to, but really good also like communicating their feelings. Why? Instead of just being like, oh yeah, like I don't know. Or you notice that about them, or they say something that like makes it clear that they like doing that. Like they like listening to people or they like writing. They like asking questions. Like why? Why do they like those things? Like what makes them good at that? Like what makes them good at asking people the right questions? What makes them good at even like verbalizing their own experiences and their feelings? That's not something that everyone feels like they're very apt at. Sometimes it's something that we develop because we have to develop. That's like a skill that you have to develop to be like really good at like overly communicating things related to your emotions, or you have to get really good at asking questions because maybe nobody was asking you questions and the only way to like form relationships then was by asking others questions. Or maybe you're really good at asking questions because it was a way to deflect from other people asking you questions. You struggle with emotional avoidance, and it's things like that about people that like allows you to really get to know them, who they are. Don't do this on a first date. That's not the advice that I'm saying. I'm not saying that, but like over time, specificity over like general conversations, specific conversations, I think is more helpful in making not only somebody feel more seen, but helping you genuinely get to know somebody. And it's easier to hone in on one conversation or topic than go between a million different other ones. I think it's more comfortable for everyone involved. But I wouldn't ask like, you don't have to go that deep on like a first date. But maybe that's not really applicable. I don't know. I guess that's it. That's just like what I was thinking about. Some tips if you're going to pay. I gave this in my last video where I kind of talked about the flirting. I think it can get really awkward when like you're on a date and it's like who's going to pay, especially when you have two people who have been sort of like put in a position where like they're both technically socially, like the social role is like they don't pay. I don't know, right? It can get really awkward. And if you want to pay, but they also want to pay, like you want to pay and you want to make sure that they don't think that this is like a friend thing, so you don't want them to pay. I don't know. There's like an awkwardness that can come with like who's gonna pay and then like kind of fighting over who's gonna pay, and it almost can get friendly when you're fighting over who's gonna pay the bill. Like it's like, no, I want you to know that I'm interested in you and like I think of you not like a friend, like this is special to me beyond friendly, like let me make this one of the ways that I show you. Something that I've done in the past, so this is my last video, after like 10 seconds or 20 seconds of that, it can't continue. There can't be this back and forth. Like it's gonna end up feeling like really friendly and weird. So I'll end up just saying like, okay, yeah, like fine, we can split it. And then I don't think anyone's ever paid with cash that I've ever been with. So they'll put a card down and then I'll put a card down. But then I take their card. I'll always grab it and then I put it in my pocket and then I'm like, sorry, like I'll give it back to you when the bill's paid. And then it's just like taken care of. And then you don't have that like awkward back and forth. I think people tend to like that. I think it's like an easy way to disarm the situation and make it like they don't have to feel like they need to keep trying to pay or like it's an expectation or feel like a pressure to or a guilt. Like, no, I'm making it really clear. No, like I'm going to pay for you. Like, thanks for the offer. Like, no, I'm going to make sure that I get to, it's not about like you letting me, like I want to. So I think that demonstrates it. Not everyone's going to like that. There's some people who would really not like that. So just gauge the situation. Some people really want to be the one that pays on a date. So if they're giving that vibe, like maybe don't do that. I like to pay on dates. I think I have every time. I just like to. So some people really just like to. If you're getting that vibe, then maybe you don't need to challenge it. But if it's going back and forth and you really want to pay, maybe that's a way to disarm it pretty quickly and like also make it clear. This is, I want to do this for you. You don't have to let me. I want to do this for you. So I'm going to make sure that I get to. Yeah. I think that's it. That's all I have. That's all that's coming to mind right now, I guess. Well, I hope that this could maybe be like a helpful conversation. I know some of it's like kind of arguably TMI, I guess. I don't know. I don't I don't know, things aren't really TMI in my mind a lot of the time, especially related to like queer sexual dynamics, particularly because I think that they're under discussed for a community that doesn't get enough places or does not get enough opportunity to openly discuss things that happen within their relationships or their dynamics. And they're honestly like the culture that surrounds like lesbian relationships and sapphic dynamics and sexual dynamics in particular, because there's so much shaming that has been done to that, and still a lot of people feel a lot of shame related to openly discussing that part of their like sexuality, even though I think it can be really helpful and healthy to be able to have those open discussions, especially when you've never been allowed to. And then you're just like on your own in the dark, and it sucks. You don't know like what the fuck, and it sucks to learn things completely alone and feel like you have no one to share this stuff with, or just like wanting at least, maybe everything I said is completely unrelatable. Like maybe it's so unrelatable and really annoying, but I still like would have rather, before I came out or when I was coming out, had someone even just share some perspective or experience, even if I never ended up relating to it, just so that I felt like I wasn't weird or crazy for even thinking about these things, and there's other people thinking about them and experiencing them, and that are openly talking about them. So maybe I don't have to keep this all to myself forever and just be like overwhelmed and feeling like insecure and have a lot of anxiety around all these things that I don't know and I don't know what I'm doing, you know? Like the anxiety when that girl asked me if I was the boy or girl doing sex. I was like, oh, so awkward. When people started looking at us, I just wanted to die. I was so speechless. Oh, I didn't say like how I ended up answering. I think after like 4 or 5 times that she asked it, she kept getting louder, right? Because she didn't think I understood her. And then eventually I just was like, I don't know. It just depends. I don't know. Which honestly ended up being a true answer. But I didn't know that I didn't have a fucking answer. I didn't have an answer. If I had like a direct answer, I would have given it, honestly. But I just didn't have one. I didn't even really know what that meant. I didn't know what it meant beyond like what I could imagine in my head, like, and think like was being mimicked from a very traditional heteronormative understanding, you know? And that's just not what it is. It doesn't have to be that way. So hope that was helpful. If you're like newly out, or you're not out yet, or you're about to like start like coming out and having these experiences, I hope that no matter what, if there's anything you can take from this video, is that you're not alone in them, in the clumsy, awkward, confused moments. You're not alone in feeling weird or bad or insecure about being like not yet experienced, you know? You're not weird for having maybe like really particular, sometimes TMI questions. I hope that you can feel safe enough here to ask them. I seriously mean that, like ask them. I hope this can be a space where you can ask them openly and know that you're not going to be judged. And you deserve to have the most wonderful, amazing experiences in whatever way that you want to have those experiences, romantic, sexual, mental, platonic, whatever. As you continue to explore your identity and like your queer identity and your experiences, you deserve to have the most wonderful ones possible. And that comes through understanding yourself really deeply to be able to find what allows you to have those wonderful experiences, what causes those wonderful feelings. I hope you give yourself the grace and room to explore then, and honestly, and not forever feel the expectation to perform, and instead genuinely embrace and enjoy, and giving yourself the opportunity to do those things, and like to remember that you are worth getting to explore and embrace joy and pleasure and all of the wonderful things that can occur in lesbian relationships or sapphic relationships in whatever way. But give yourself the opportunity to have those wonderful experiences by giving yourself the opportunity to have the really vulnerable ones and the really vulnerable conversations that lead you to understand yourself enough to know what it even would be to feel wonderful, what would need to happen with you and another person or people to feel that wonderful feeling. That takes time, and it takes vulnerability and honesty and openness, and you deserve that. So I hope you give yourself the grace in these situations. Don't judge yourself too hard, and also give yourself the right to have those kind of like open conversations and experiences. Know that you are just as worthy as anyone else to have them. So I guess that's it. My camera's gonna die. I can see the thing flashing. So I'm gonna end it here. Thank you for watching. I really appreciate it. I hope maybe it was helpful. I appreciate you listening to my experiences and stories. If you have anything you want to share of your own, please share it down below if you feel comfortable. If not, you can send it to me directly. My email's down below. If you want to submit something to be like uploaded on the website related to this or anything else, also feel free to do that. I would love to hear your experiences. I'd be honored to be able to hear them. And I'd love to be able to hear them, whether they're here or in my email, anywhere. And yeah, your voice is not only welcome but wanted, and so are your experiences. No question or no topic is too TMI, especially when it comes to things that we don't ever feel safe enough to even be able to discuss. You will not be shamed here. So I hope that you can remember that and you know that. And okay, I'm gonna end it here because my camera's really gonna die. So thank you for watching. I have a Patreon as well. It's more like of the more explicit sexual topics. It'll be linked below if you're interested in that. The most recent one's about like relearning how to enjoy sex after trauma, if you're curious. There's 2 free videos as well to go look at. My funny lesbian sex stories are over there too. Okay, my camera's gonna die. So thank you for watching. I really appreciate it. I'm wishing you all the most wonderful lesbian and sapphic experiences ever. I hope you have a good rest of your day, and I will see you in the next video. Okay, bye.